Welcome our esteemed viewers back at home. It's my pleasure to come back here again. Last time we had looked at nouns. We looked at collective and compound nouns. So today we are going to look at another aspect of parts of speech. And specifically today, we will look at verbs. Today we are going to look at verbs. Verbs, as you know, verbs are words that show action. Verbs are words that convey an action, occurrence, or state of being. So basically, a verb is another part of speech that is very important in the construction of sentences. And a verb is a part of speech that conveys an action, an occurrence, or a state of being. They describe, they are used to convey, they are words that are used to convey, an action, occurrence, or an event, Yeah, so they are used to indicate, a verb is used to indicate what the subject of a sentence does, says, or feels. Verbs indicate what the subject of a sentence does, says, or feels. So when we talk about a subject of a sentence, as we all know, we have a subject in a sentence, subject, object. We also have an object in a sentence. And finally, we have a verb. So all these aspects are very important. All these aspects are very important in construction of a sentence. Now, when we talk about a subject, who is the subject in a sentence? Object, who is the object, and what is the verb? And the verb is what we are looking at today. So the subject, if we construct a sentence, for example, John plays the piano well. So in this sentence, we can be able to identify these three aspects. So John is the subject. We can say that John is the subject. Plays is the verb, what we are looking at today. And finally, the piano is the object. So in this case, we are going to say that John plays the piano well. John is the subject because John is the doer of the action. Then plays is the verb because this is the action itself. Plays is the action itself. And piano is the object, and the object is the receiver of the action. The object is the receiver of the action. So John does the action, the piano receives the action. Plays is the verb, the part of speech that we are looking at today. So that's what I wanted to clarify when we say that they are words that are used to convey an action. So this is the action of playing. The action of playing, an action, an occurrence, or an event. What a verb does, it's that it indicates what the subject of the sentence, the subject in this case being John, the subject of the sentence does, says. It looks at what the subject of the sentence does, says, or feels, So that is what a verb normally does. We can look at a few examples of verbs so that we can know what we are talking about. Examples of verbs. One example is the one that we have given here. Play. Another example. So let's look at examples. Examples of verbs. Examples of verbs. One of the examples that I can give you is the one you are doing right now, watching. Watching is the action of looking at. Number 2, we have playing. Number 3, we can have singing. Singing is another verb. Number 4, we have write. Read. We have sleep. We have walk, write, jump, run, and is. So the main focus here, actually, when I gave those verbs, is that is also categorized as a verb. Is categorized as a verb. As a verb. Like, for example, a very simple example when it comes to is as a verb. Mwalimu Kamau is writing on the board. Another example we can give is John plays the piano well. So plays is the action of being done by John, who is the one that is doing the action. As we had talked about, John in that case is the subject. Mary read the storybook yesterday. So Mary is the subject of that particular sentence. Then read is the action. Read is the action, the verb of that particular sentence. So now when we come back to this sentence, I want you to look at this particular sentence. It has two verbs. The first verb being is. The second verb, as you can see from home or from the screen, is writing. Writing is also a verb. So we have two verbs that are following each other. And that brings me to the point of the day, which is we are looking at something we call helping verbs. Helping verbs. We have something we call helping verbs. These are verbs that are very crucial in the construction of a sentence. Now, let us look at helping auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs. Now, these auxiliary verbs, they have another name. We give them another name. We give them another name, which is helping verbs. So these auxiliary verbs can also be referred to as helping verbs, because auxiliary verbs are used in English to indicate tense, mood, or voice of the sentence. An auxiliary verb is a verb that is used along with the main verb in a sentence to make it more meaningful. it is used to alter the tense, mood, or voice of a sentence. Now, we have talked about what the helping verb does and what it is. It helps the main verbs. So we have two verbs in a sentence. We have main verbs, and we have the auxiliary verb. The auxiliary verbs. Now, when we look at this, the main verb and the auxiliary verb, most of the time you are going to find, and it's almost a rule, and it should be a rule, that the main verb, the auxiliary verb always comes before the main verb, always comes before the main verbs. Before the main verb. So the auxiliary, since it's helping the main verb, it should always come before the main verb so that it can bring more sense into the sentence. And as we have seen on your screen, is that the auxiliary verbs are used to change the tense, can be used to change the tense of a sentence, the mood, and the voice in a sentence. So I want us to look at examples. of auxiliary verbs. I want us to look at examples of auxiliary verbs. So examples of auxiliary verbs. So some of them are the forms of be. All the forms of be can be categorized as auxiliary verbs, we also have might, may, must, should, shall, could, would, will, has, have, where, was, are, and is. So those are some of the examples of auxiliary verbs. And as I had stated before, is that these verbs should always appear before the main verb. So in a sentence, we have the main verb and the helping verb. So in a sentence, we have sentences that, for example, in a sentence, we have he was writing on the board yesterday. Jerry is watching the television. So in this case, we can see that Jerry is doing the action of watching the television. So Jerry is the subject of the subject of the sentence. Is the helping verb, and it is helping which verb? The main verb, which is watching. It is helping the verb which is watching the television. Jack has gone home. So Jack is the subject. Has is the helping verb, or in another word, we have said it is called auxiliary verb. And gone is the main verb in that case. And then home is the object, the receiver of the action. Where has Jack gone? Jack has gone home. So In that case, Jack has gone home. Right? Now, Jack, we have said, is the subject. The subject. Has is the auxiliary stroke helping verb. Stroke helping verb. Gone is also a verb. Gone is a verb. And this is the main verb. Main verb. It's the main verb. And finally, home is the object. Object. As I had stated earlier, it is very important to follow the rules of grammar, because always we follow the subject, verb, object, the subject, verb, object rule. Now, the only time that these rules can interchange, is when we talk about passive and active voice. That is when the subject object rule, the subject verb object rule is not applied. So in this case, when we have the subject, then the verb, then the object, most of the time that sentence is in active voice. So most of the sentence is in active voice. So SVO is active voice. Then we have the OVS. This is when we have the passive voice. So that was just by the way. We have the main focus here, which is the auxiliary verbs. So when we have a sentence, like for example, John or the dog jumped over the river. The dog was jumping joyfully. Yeah. So the dog was jumping joyfully. So in this case, you can see that the dog is the subject. Was is the auxiliary verb. Jumping is the main verb. And joyfully is just an explanation of how much he was doing it joyfully. Adjective. It's an adjective. So we have so you can see that the auxiliary verbs, they are very useful when we talk about changing of the tense of the sentence. It changes the tense of the sentence. It also changes the mood of the sentence, and it also changes the voice in a sentence. So when we talk about tense, how many tenses do you know, for example, viewers at home? I know you know some. So we are going to get the tenses. We have the present tense. The present tense, what is happening right now. Present tense, what is happening right now. We also have the past tense. So when we talk about past tense is what happened previously. Like not today, yesterday, what happened yesterday. So yesterday is in the past. That is where we have past tense, something that happened yesterday. Then we have future tense. Future tense. Future tense is something you are anticipating to happen or something that is going to happen come tomorrow or in the future. So that is why it's called future tense. So you can see that the auxiliary verbs, they are very important when it comes to determining how the sentence is going to be when we talk about the tenses, So for example, I'm just going to give you a very simple example. The teacher will give us an assignment. The teacher will give us an assignment at the end of the lesson. At the end of the lesson. Okay? So when we have such an example, we have the teacher, the subject, and it's very important for me to keep on going back to that. The subject, the doer of the action, will. Will here, we have two verbs. Will and give. Now, will is helping this main verb. It's helping the main verb. So the teacher will give us an assignment at the end of the lesson. The teacher will give us an assignment at the end of the lesson. Now, when we look at this will, it changes the tense completely of the sentence. When we talk about will, it's something that has not been done yet, but you are anticipating that it is going to happen definitely. Now, will is, it changes the tense of this sentence to make it future tense. Now, if we take the same sentence and we put it in past tense, you are going to see how much impact the auxiliary verb plays, or the role the auxiliary verb plays when it comes to that. Now, the teacher had given us an assignment at the end of the lesson. At the end of the lesson. At the end of the lesson, you can see that we still have two verbs in this case. The first verb is had. Had is the auxiliary verb in this case. Given is the main verb. So this is the auxiliary, and this one is the main verb. So as you can see that this auxiliary verb actually determines the tense of this main verb, the tense of the main verb, because it is helping the main verb convey whatever meaning you are trying to bring out in a sentence. So the teacher had given us an assignment. Had is the auxiliary verb. Had is the auxiliary verb that is used to help the main verb to identify the tense of that particular sentence, the tense of the sentence. If we take this sentence again, and put it in the future, we have looked at the future tense here. We have looked at the future tense. Future tense. This one, had, the auxiliary verb, helps you identify that this is in the past tense. Past tense. We can take the same sentence and put it in the present tense. The present tense with the help of another auxiliary verb still. Now, we are going to look at this sentence in another format. So the teacher, let's remove the head to indicate past. Now we want us to look at the present, the now, what is happening right now. That is the present tense. The teacher has given us an assignment. So in this case, you can see that has transformed this sentence. Even if we have just rubbed off the head, when we have had, that was past. Now that we have has, it is the present tense. That is how much role the auxiliary verb plays when it comes to the tenses, when it comes to the tenses of a sentence. The tenses of a sentence. That is how much. It is very crucial for you to note these things down, for you not to forget. Okay. So if we can look at another example. We can give as many examples as possible so that we can get to understand exactly what it is we are talking about. Now, we can give another example, and an example as simple as this one. Jack has gone home. Now let's look at that sentence. Jack has gone home. Jack is the Jack has gone home. So as you can see, still we have an auxiliary verb, which is our main focus for the day, actually. Auxiliary verbs. Then we have this main verb. We have the main verb. So you can see that this one is indicating that Jack has gone home not long ago, just a few minutes ago. So that is the present tense. He has gone right now, like he has gone home right now. We can still change this one. The auxiliary verb is the one that determines the tense of the sentence. The auxiliary verb determines the tense of the sentence. So in this case, we can have this one is the present tense. I want us to transform it into future tense. Jack, future tense is something you are expecting that is going to happen. That is the future tense. So Jack will. He will do it eventually. He will do it. Jack will go home. You see how much this one is affecting the main verb. The auxiliary verb is affecting the main verb in terms of tenses. So will indicates that it is something that Jack is going to do eventually. Then we have talked about future tense. Then finally, we will look at the past tense. So this one is going to change the main verb. The auxiliary verb is going to change the main verb so that it can be in the same tense as the whole of the sentence. So like for example, still looking at that sentence, Jack had gone home. Jack had gone home. If you look at this sentence, had has made go into gone, has changed the tense of the word go into gone. Had gone, something that he did previous day, the previous day or a few days ago. So that is the past tense. It's something that he did that is in the past tense. Past tense. Past tense. So that is all to do with the tenses. The tenses. The auxiliary verbs also, as we had seen earlier, they not only affect the tenses, but also the mood of the sentence. The mood of the sentence. And what do we know about mood? What do you know? How do you understand the word mood from your own perspective or from what you have learned? Mood of the sentence auxiliary verbs, help to identify the what? Identify the mood of a sentence. The mood of a sentence. So for example, we have a sentence like it might rain tomorrow, it might rain today. Let's say it might rain today. So in that sentence, it might rain today, you can see that might is the helping verb. Might is the helping verb. It might rain today. So rain is can be both a noun. Rain can be both a noun and also a verb. So when you talk about rain as a noun, so the rain, which is the noun, is the water, the downpour of the water from the skies. So that is what we call the rain. That is a noun. When it comes to rain as a verb, it will rain. That is the action of water trickling down from the skies to the earth. That is the action of raining. The action of raining. So when we look at that sentence, it might rain today. Might is indicative of possibility. It might not. There is uncertainty when it comes to that action of raining. So there is uncertainty of that particular action to be done. So might is the auxiliary verb or the helping verb that is helping determine the mood of that sentence. So in another instance, we could, for example, say, the students must listen and obey to the teachers. The students must and they must listen and obey to their teacher. Be obedient to their teachers. Now, when we talk about must, this is the action that indicates that whatever it is that is being talked about in the sentence must. So it is compulsory. So should is also another auxiliary verb that we had seen on our screens. Should is also another auxiliary verb that is very important. It shows it shows that you are obligated to do whatever it is you have been told to do. Like for example, you should do your homework on time. You should do your homework on time. So should indicates that you are obliged, you have the obligation to do whatever it is that you are asked to do. That is the mood of the sentence. Obligation, you have to do it. Or you have the chance to do it. Cool is also another auxiliary verb. Cool is also another auxiliary verb. And when we talk about cool, this is the action. This is the auxiliary verb that helps you see whether you can or cannot. Can or cannot. So there is possibility of you being able to do whatever it is you're being told or not. So we are he could have been a good player if he trained properly. He could have been a good player if he trained properly. So when we talk about could, it shows the state of the ability to do something, but you have the option of not doing it. Another auxiliary verb that we can look at, we have is shall. You can, especially you students who are, for example, Christians, we have the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments have auxiliary verbs in them. So, like for example, you shall not, or you should not kill or commit murder. You should not commit murder. So when we talk about you should not commit murder, the mood of that sentence is something that is against the rules. For example, you should not commit murder. Should is an auxiliary verb. Should is an auxiliary verb. And you can see most of those commandments, they have those auxiliary verbs. They are very important to determine the mood of the sentence. So you can see the seriousness of whatever you're being told just by looking at the auxiliary verb that we have. So you can look at the seriousness of the action that is being committed by determining the auxiliary verbs, by determining the auxiliary verbs in the sentence. So it's very important for you to observe a sentence and study it completely so that you can be able to identify those aspects that are found in a noun, in a sentence, I mean, so that you can be able to know the roles each aspect is playing in that sentence, in the construction of that sentence. You can also be able to determine the voice in that sentence when we look at auxiliary verbs. Now, if there is something that is very important for learners to remember, is that is also a part of a verb. It's also an example of a verb is, because it gives us the forms of be. There's, for example, is, are, is, all the forms of be can be used as verbs, auxiliary verbs, to be very precise, auxiliary verbs. So there are also examples of auxiliary verbs. For example, in this sentence that we had given here, my pen has does not have. Now, what I was saying is that we have is, are is also another form of be. Was, were, all those are forms of be that are very important for you to identify in a sentence. So when you look at the sentence, you identify the subject, as we had talked about earlier. You identify the subject, you identify the object. So remember, and it's very important, that the subject is the doer of the action. Who is doing that action that is being talked about? And the action we have talked about is a verb. A verb is the action. Now the object, as I had stated earlier, the object is the receiver of the action. The receiver of the action. So who is receiving that action being done by the subject? So it's very important for you to identify those things. So when you are able to identify the object, okay, and when you are able to identify the subject and the verb, you are going to determine which is the auxiliary verb, or what is the auxiliary verb. We also have modal verbs, modal auxiliary verbs. Those are other verbs that we will look at as we progress. But as for now, I hope that you, our viewers at home, have understood what an auxiliary verb is. What an auxiliary verb is. And the work of the auxiliary verb is to help the main verb. So you can find a sentence where you have two verbs and you wonder how that is happening. But definitely you are going to learn that those verbs are helping verbs. They are used to help the main verb so that the main verb can be able to deliver the message or to take the message home and to give meaning to the sentence, to give meaning to that sentence. So when we talk about the auxiliary verbs, they help in the identification of mood. We have talked about mood. We have also talked about tense, and we have talked about voice. So when we talk about tenses, modal, auxiliary verbs help us identify the tenses that are used in that particular sentence. So when we say he was teaching, it's something that he did, okay? He did. He was teaching. The was is the auxiliary verb or the helping verb that is helping us know the tense of that sentence. So teaching, it's the main verb. It's something that he did earlier. We also have the mood, as I had stated, the mood. When we talk about mood, it's the seriousness, as I had said, the seriousness you should take in a particular sentence. All right, now I want us to look at as many examples as possible so that you can have a detailed information of what we are talking about, or so that you can understand better what it is that I'm trying to bring out. Now, about the mood in a sentence. The people shall, the people shall obey the traffic rules. Shall obey the traffic rules. When we talk about shall can indicate that you have to obey the traffic rules. The people shall. The people could obey the traffic rules. So when we talk about could, you have been given the option to do it or not. When you talk about could, it's either you do it or you don't. Will, when you talk about the people will obey the traffic rules. When we talk about will, the people will obey the traffic rules. When we talk about will is a determiner of what mood the auxiliary verb is trying to bring out. Will. So these, you are willing to do it. Like you are not going to be coerced to follow those rules. You are not supposed actually to be coerced to follow simple rules. The people could obey the traffic rules. So could is an auxiliary verb. Could is an auxiliary verb, and obey is the main verb. So it is determining the mood that these sentences are carrying. The mood that these sentences are carrying. So I would want you to look at those notes on your own, and if you have captured anything on your notes, it's very important for you to go back to those notes and you read them, revise them, so that you can be able to answer the questions appropriately when it comes to the exams, and so that you can be able to practice and memorize. So in this case, you should go and look at some examples of the auxiliary verbs. You should construct your own examples. At least you can look at, you can have at least 6 examples. I had left homework the previous time. I had left something to do with compound and collective nouns, but I hope that you have understood what it is we have been talking about. Let me just recap. And revisit everything that we have been talking about. Like, for example, we have been talking about verbs. What is a verb? A verb is a doing word. It's as simple as that. A verb is a doing word. That is very important for you to remember. A doing word is the action. So a verb mostly comprises of action. And a verb is very crucial in the construction of sentences. It's an aspect that you might not miss. So most of the sentences that you find and most of the sentences that you actually construct on your own, you most likely never lack a verb, an action, most likely. And you might not do it coherently, but you might find yourself using auxiliary verbs. You might wonder what auxiliary verbs are, but you can find that you use auxiliary verb most of the time in most of your speeches. In most of the speeches that you give, you will find that you have auxiliary verbs. So the assignment that I'm going to leave for you today is very simple. Go home, go ahead and construct like 10 sentences using the various examples that we have given. The examples that we have given may include the forms of be. It's very easy for you to construct a sentence using the auxiliary verb, which is, was, shall, should. All those are some of the auxiliary verbs that you can use in the construction of your sentences. Something else you can do is identify auxiliary and identify auxiliary verbs in a sentence and how they are used. Something else you can look at is modal auxiliary verbs. It has been my pleasure to take you through the lesson, and I hope you have enjoyed and you have learned something, and I hope I see you again very soon, because we have a lot to cover. We have a lot we can learn from each other. And the next time, for example, if we get the chance to meet again, we are going to look at modal auxiliary verbs. Modal auxiliary verbs. These are the verbs that we will look at next. And it's very simple and very easy. These things are very easy for us to capture. It's never a challenge to look at parts of speech. They are very easy because most of the time you use these things in your speech, your communication. When you are writing in any subject, you use English, and most of the time you will find that you have used those parts of speech without your knowledge. You might not know you are using them, but definitely you are using them. So it's my pleasure, it has been my pleasure to be with you, and I hope that our next lesson, it's going to be as productive. I hope you have captured something today, or if you had forgotten something, I hope that now that we have done a recap of those things, you are going to understand them even better. So you can have yourselves a lovely time. Thank you very much.